He had already turned toward the exit when the laughter hit him, not loud, not open, just sharp enough to sting. The kind reserved for outsiders who don't belong. Rain dripped from the hem of his tailored coat onto polished marble as the maitre d' smiled thinly and pretended not to notice. To them he was just another foreigner who missed the memo about reservations, dress codes, and worth. They didn't know his name, they didn't care, and for the first time in years neither did he. The room shimmered with quiet wealth. Crystal glasses, low voices, practiced smiles. Power sat comfortably here and it never expected to be questioned. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest, not anger yet, something colder, disappointment. He had come for a meeting that could move markets, save jobs, change futures. Instead, he was being measured by wet shoes and an accent. He took a step back, ready to leave it all behind. That was when she spoke. Not loudly, not to impress anyone. Just one sentence, calm and precise, cutting through the air like truth through silk. In Arabic. Everything stopped. If you want the full truth hit like so this story reaches more people. The laughter died, the smiles cracked, and the man who owned more than everyone in the room combined slowly turned because suddenly someone saw him. He had already turned toward the exit when the laughter hit him, not loud, not open, just sharp enough to sting. The kind reserved for outsiders who don't belong. Rain dripped from the hem of his tailored coat onto polished marble as the maitre d' smiled thinly and pretended not to notice. To them he was just another foreigner who missed the memo about reservations, dress codes, and worth. They didn't know his name, they didn't care, and for the first time in years neither did he. The room shimmered with quiet wealth. Crystal glasses, low voices, practiced smiles. Power sat comfortably here and it never expected to be questioned. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest, not anger yet, something colder, disappointment. He had come for a meeting that could move markets, save jobs, change futures. Instead, he was being measured by wet shoes and an accent. He took a step back, ready to leave it all behind. That was when she spoke. Not loudly, not to impress anyone. Just one sentence, calm and precise, cutting through the air like truth through silk. In Arabic. Everything stopped. If you want the full truth hit like so this story reaches more people. The laughter died, the smiles cracked, and the man who owned more than everyone in the room combined slowly turned because suddenly someone saw him. She hadn't planned to speak. That was the truth she would remember later when everything unraveled. For now she stood frozen near the service station, fingers tight around a tray that felt suddenly too heavy. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. Silence kept rent paid. Silence kept managers calm. Silence kept her invisible. But the words escaped her anyway, shaped by years she never talked about, years her coworkers couldn't imagine. The Arabic flowed naturally, respectful, formal, unmistakably fluent. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't an accent picked up from a show. It was the language of her childhood, of lullabies and arguments, of dignity. The billionaire's shoulders stiffened. Slowly he turned back toward her. For a heartbeat his face showed something raw, surprise first, then disbelief, then recognition so sharp it hurt to watch. He answered her in Arabic, quietly, asking where she had learned to speak like that. The question wasn't casual, it was personal. Around them confusion spread like spilled wine. The maitre d' frowned, already irritated that the script had changed. A waiter snorted under his breath. Someone near the windows whispered that this was getting uncomfortable. It was. Power hates uncertainty. She met the man's eyes and answered simply. She told him where she was from, where she had lived, what she had lost without saying any of it outright. He listened, really listened, and something in his expression hardened, not toward her but toward the room. In that moment, he wasn't deciding whether to stay for dinner. He was deciding what this place would pay for its arrogance. The maitre d' recovered first. He always did. Years of deciding who mattered had trained him well. He stepped between them with a smile sharpened to a blade and said something dismissive in English, something about staff overstepping and guests being confused. He did not realize the billionaire understood every word. He did not realize the waitress understood the insult beneath it even more clearly. The man replied in Arabic again, this time colder, shorter, the kind of sentence that didn't ask questions, the kind that ended conversations. The waitress felt the temperature of the room drop as if someone had opened a window to winter. Chairs shifted. Glasses paused halfway to lips. People sensed something expensive was about to break. The maitre d' laughed it off, switching to a tone meant for children and subordinates. He gestured toward the exit, suggesting the guest cool off and return another night. His voice carried confidence built on one assumption, that power always looked like him. The billionaire looked at the waitress instead. He asked her name. When she answered, he repeated it carefully as if committing it to memory. Then he asked her a second question, still in Arabic, softer now. Did they always treat people like this? If she hesitated, truth could cost her everything. Silence would cost her nothing. But she remembered every time dignity had been taken from her in exchange for survival. She nodded once. If you believe she deserved justice, comment justice below. That single nod was all he needed. The billionaire turned back to the maitre d', and this time he spoke in English. Perfect, unaccented, deliberate, he asked for the owner by name. The smile faltered. The maitre d' glanced toward the office, then back at the damp coat, the scuffed shoes, the woman who should have been quiet. He said the owner was unavailable and motioned again toward the door, adding a warning about security. Security arrived quickly. Two men, big shoulders, empty eyes, they placed themselves just close enough to be a threat without touching. The billionaire didn't move, he didn't raise his voice. He simply asked the waitress in Arabic to repeat what she had said earlier, the first sentence that changed everything. All she did. The words landed harder this time, clearer, the meaning impossible to miss. Around them, a few diners stiffened. One man at a corner table lowered his phone, suddenly interested. Another woman whispered that she thought she recognized the name the billionaire had used. The maitre d' snapped. He told the waitress to go back to work. He told security to escort the guest out. His authority rang hollow now, stretched thin by something he couldn't control. The billionaire smiled once, not kindly. He reached into his coat and removed his phone, placing it on the host stand like a marker on a map. He said calmly that if he left, the building would change owners before sunrise. The room held its breath. The billionaire turned back to the maitre d', and this time he spoke in English. Perfect, unaccented, deliberate, he asked for the owner by name. The smile faltered. The maitre d' glanced toward the office, then back at the damp coat, the scuffed shoes, the woman who should have been quiet. He said the owner was unavailable and motioned again toward the door, adding a warning about security. Security arrived quickly. Two men, big shoulders, empty eyes, they placed themselves just close enough to be a threat without touching. The billionaire didn't move, he didn't raise his voice. He simply asked the waitress in Arabic to repeat what she had said earlier, the first sentence that changed everything. All she did. The words landed harder this time, clearer, the meaning impossible to miss. Around them, a few diners stiffened. One man at a corner table lowered his phone, suddenly interested. Another woman whispered that she thought she recognized the name the billionaire had used. The maitre d' snapped. He told the waitress to go back to work. He told security to escort the guest out. His authority rang hollow now, stretched thin by something he couldn't control. The billionaire smiled once, not kindly. He reached into his coat and removed his phone, placing it on the host stand like a marker on a map. He said calmly that if he left, the building would change owners before sunrise. The room held its breath. The maitre d' reached for the phone, intending to slide it away to reclaim control through motion if not authority. The billionaire's hand closed over it first, not aggressively, just enough to stop him. Their eyes met, and for the first time, fear flickered behind practiced arrogance. "You don't touch what isn't yours," the billionaire said softly. Security shifted closer. One of them cracked his neck. The waitress felt her pulse in her ears. She knew how this usually ended. Men like her boss didn't lose in rooms like this. Men like her didn't get defended. The billionaire turned to her again and asked one more question in Arabic, quieter than before. Would she be willing to tell the truth if asked? Her mouth went dry. Truth had consequences. She glanced around the room, at the diners who had watched her be dismissed, at the staff who avoided her eyes, at the man waiting patiently for her answer as if it mattered. Oh, she nodded. The maitre d' scoffed loudly, accusing them both of causing a scene. He announced that the guest was no longer welcome and that the waitress would be written up for insubordination. His voice rose, feeding on its own echo. That was when the elevator chimed. The owner stepped out. The owner looked smaller than his reputation. Expensive suit, yes, but his confidence faltered the moment he took in the scene. Security poised, diners staring, his maitre d' flushed and over-explaining, and at the center, a man standing calmly beside a waitress who should not have mattered. "What's going on?" the owner asked. The maitre d' rushed in, words tumbling over each other, framing the billionaire as disruptive, disrespectful, a problem that needed removing. He spoke fast, hoping speed would replace truth. The owner listened, nodding, then turned to the billionaire with visible irritation. Before he could speak, the billionaire said the owner's name correctly, first and last. Then he mentioned a property on the west side, then a debt, then a pending acquisition that hadn't been announced yet. Each detail landed like a weight. The owner's irritation melted into something closer to panic. The billionaire gestured gently toward the waitress and said, "She speaks for me." The room went quiet enough to hear cutlery settle. The owner hesitated, then asked her what had happened. Her throat tightened. She started slowly, carefully describing the mockery, the assumptions, the way respect had been withheld like a privilege. She didn't embellish. She didn't accuse. She just told it as it was. Halfway through, the owner raised a hand. The maitre d' went pale. The owner turned to his maitre d' and asked him very calmly if any of what she said was untrue. The question wasn't loud, but it carried authority. The kind that didn't need volume. The maitre d' laughed nervously and tried to deflect, calling it a misunderstanding, a cultural mix-up, a sensitive guest taking things personally. The billionaire interrupted him, not with anger but with precision. He repeated the insults back, word for word, including the ones spoken under the breath, including the joke meant to humiliate. He translated them slowly so no one could pretend they hadn't heard. The color drained from the maitre d's face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to hide behind. The owner exhaled sharply and looked around the room, suddenly aware of the audience. Power hates witnesses. He asked security to step back. They did. Then he asked the waitress how long she had worked there. 3 years, she said. And how often, the owner asked, does this happen? She didn't answer immediately. She thought of the shifts she'd gone home crying, the comments she swallowed, the apologies she'd made for existing. Then she spoke. Every day, she said. The billionaire nodded once, as if a final piece had clicked into place. Comment justice if you believe she deserved justice. The owner dismissed the maitre d' with a sharp glance and asked him to wait near the bar. It wasn't a punishment yet, but it felt like one. The man obeyed, posture stiff, jaw clenched, eyes burning with humiliation he had never learned to process. The billionaire finally stepped fully into the room. He removed his coat and folded it over his arm unhurried, as if time itself had adjusted to him. He explained why he had come, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the calm certainty of someone used to being believed. He spoke about a partnership, about an investment that would have saved the restaurant and expanded it globally. The owner listened, face tight, realizing what arrogance had almost cost him. Then the billionaire stopped speaking and looked at the waitress again. He asked her gently why she had stayed in a place that treated her this way. The question wasn't strategic, it was human. She answered honestly, because she needed the money, because her mother was sick, because leaving without something better lined up felt like falling without knowing where the ground was. The room shifted. Even the diners who had avoided eye contact earlier now looked uncomfortable. The owner cleared his throat and asked what it would take to make this right. The maitre d' stiffened from across the room. The billionaire said, "Start by listening to her." The owner nodded and gestured for the waitress to sit, but she remained standing. Old habits. Standing meant readiness. Standing meant survival. She clasped her hands together to hide their shaking and spoke about schedules that changed without notice, about tips that vanished, about jokes that weren't jokes when you were the one being laughed at. She spoke about learning to make herself smaller so others could feel bigger. The maitre d' tried to interrupt. The owner shut him down with a single raised finger. The billionaire watched closely, not just the words but the pauses between them. He noticed how she chose honesty without bitterness, how she didn't ask for sympathy, only acknowledgement. When she finished, the room felt heavier, like everyone had just been handed something they couldn't put down. The billionaire turned to the owner and said this wasn't about one man or one night. It was about culture, about what a place rewarded and what it tolerated. He said money could fix many things but not character. That had to be confronted. Then he looked back at the waitress and asked her one final question, again in Arabic, quietly enough that only she heard. If change was possible here, would she help make it happen? As she swallowed, she thought of fear, then of possibility. Oh, she said yes. Type yes if you want to see all targets hit at once. The days that followed moved faster than the night ever had. Messages arrived before she could process what had happened. Meetings she never imagined being invited to. A quiet phone call from the owner asking if she was serious about helping rebuild what had been broken. She said yes again, though her voice trembled this time. The billionaire kept his distance at first. No grand gestures, no promises, just follow-through. Consultants appeared, policies changed. Staff meetings were held where people were allowed to speak without fear. Some left, some stayed. Those who stayed stood a little straighter. She still wore the same uniform, still worked the same shifts, but the room felt different now. Lighter, safer, power had shifted and everyone felt it. Not because someone had lost everything, but because someone had finally been seen. One evening, as she wiped down a table near closing, the billionaire returned. No entourage, no announcement. He sat where she could see him and waited. When she approached, he thanked her, not for speaking Arabic, not for changing his mind, for choosing courage when silence would have been easier. He told her he hadn't planned to intervene that night, he had planned to leave. But dignity, when recognized, demands response. He asked her what she wanted next, not what she needed, what she wanted. She had never been asked that before. She didn't answer right away. Want was a dangerous word. Want implied choice, and choice implied risk. For years, she had lived in the narrow space between bills and exhaustion, between obligation and fear. Want had been a luxury she couldn't afford to imagine, so she looked around the room instead, at tables being reset, at coworkers laughing more freely than before, at a place that finally felt human. "I want to learn," she said slowly. "I want to understand how decisions get made. I want to stop feeling like my life is something that just happens to me." The billionaire nodded, as if that answer confirmed something he had already known. He told her he would be leaving the city again soon, but before he did, there were people she should meet, books she should read, opportunities that didn't come with hidden costs. He didn't promise success, he promised access. There was a difference. Weeks passed, then months. She found herself sitting in rooms she used to walk past without being noticed, listening more than speaking, absorbing how power moved quietly, how respect was often given before it was earned, and how easily it could be abused when left unchecked. She learned quickly. The restaurant changed too, not dramatically. Subtly, the kind of change that lasts. Schedules stabilized, pay became transparent, voices mattered. And one night, when a new hire froze under pressure, she stepped in without thinking and spoke gently, the way no one ever had to her. If this shocked you, comment seen below. Change didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly in small moments that stacked on top of each other, a manager asking instead of ordering, a schedule posted early, tips divided fairly without whispers or fear. These were not miracles, but to her they felt just as rare. The billionaire checked in occasionally, short messages, articles forwarded, questions that forced her to think beyond survival. He never hovered, he never reminded her of the night that started it all. He treated her not like a project, but like someone capable of steering her own future. One evening, long after closing, she stood alone by the windows and watched the city move below. She realized something then that unsettled her more than fear ever had. She wasn't angry anymore. The resentment she'd carried like armor had softened into clarity. She didn't want revenge, she wanted impact. She began mentoring new staff, translating policies into people language, listening when someone was struggling instead of telling them to toughen up. Slowly, others followed her lead. Culture shifted the way weather does gradually until one day you notice the season has changed. When the owner formally offered her a leadership role, she surprised herself by negotiating. Calmly, confidently, she asked for authority, not just a title, for systems, not praise. The owner agreed. That night, as she locked up, she sent a message to the billionaire. One sentence, in Arabic: "Thank you for seeing me before I knew how to see myself." The response came back almost immediately. A simple acknowledgement, no flourish, no praise, just respect returned in kind. She smiled and put the phone away, feeling something settle inside her that had been restless for years. Life didn't transform overnight. Her mother still had appointments, bills still arrived. Some days were still hard, but the ground beneath her felt solid now. She wasn't bracing for impact anymore. She was standing with intention. The restaurant began to attract attention for reasons no one had predicted. Not just the food, not the decor, the atmosphere. Word spread quietly that it was a place where people were treated well. Staff stayed, customers noticed. Reviews mentioned warmth instead of prestige, humanity instead of exclusivity. One afternoon, a young woman approached her near the host stand. New hire, nervous. She spoke softly and asked if it was true that management actually listened here. The question caught her off guard. She saw herself in that uncertainty. She answered honestly, "Yes, but only if you speak." The woman nodded, relieved, and thanked her. As she walked away, the weight of responsibility settled gently on her shoulders. This was bigger than one night, bigger than one language spoken at the right moment. This was about what happened next and next and next. Late that evening, as the lights dimmed and the last table cleared, she realized she no longer felt invisible. Oh, she felt present too. The response came back almost immediately. A simple acknowledgement, no flourish, no praise, just respect returned in kind. She smiled and put the phone away, feeling something settle inside her that had been restless for years. Life didn't transform overnight. Her mother still had appointments, bills still arrived. Some days were still hard, but the ground beneath her felt solid now. She wasn't bracing for impact anymore. She was standing with intention. The restaurant began to attract attention for reasons no one had predicted. Not just the food, not the decor, the atmosphere. Word spread quietly that it was a place where people were treated well. Staff stayed, customers noticed. Reviews mentioned warmth instead of prestige, humanity instead of exclusivity. One afternoon, a young woman approached her near the host stand. New hire, nervous. She spoke softly and asked if it was true that management actually listened here. The question caught her off guard. She saw herself in that uncertainty. She answered honestly, "Yes, but only if you speak." The woman nodded, relieved, and thanked her. As she walked away, the weight of responsibility settled gently on her shoulders. This was bigger than one night, bigger than one language spoken at the right moment. This was about what happened next and next and next. Late that evening, as the lights dimmed and the last table cleared, she realized she no longer felt invisible. Oh, she felt present too. The transition was careful, deliberate. She didn't leave the restaurant behind, she helped replace herself. Trained people, documented systems, made sure what they had built wouldn't collapse the moment she stepped away. Leadership, she learned, wasn't about being indispensable. It was about making yourself unnecessary. Her new role took her into rooms that once would have intimidated her into silence. Corporate offices, investment discussions, policy meetings where words carried weight long after they were spoken. At first, she listened more than she spoke, old instincts, but when she did speak, people leaned in, not because of her past, but because of her clarity. She traveled, cities blurred together. Hotels all looked the same after a while, but everywhere she went she looked for the same things: who was being ignored, who was being talked over, who was doing the work without getting the credit. She asked questions others didn't think to ask, she remembered names. One night after a long day of meetings, she sat alone in a quiet lounge and realized how far she had come. Not in status, in agency. She was no longer reacting to life, she was shaping it. The billionaire watched all of this from a respectful distance. When he spoke, it was as an equal. When he offered guidance, it was requested, not imposed. He told her once that real power was knowing when to step back. She understood what he meant now. Well, she had found her voice, and she intended to use it. The moment that confirmed everything came quietly. No cameras, no applause, just a decision made without fear. She was reviewing a proposal when she noticed a line item buried deep in the document, a cost-saving measure that looked harmless on paper but would have pushed pressure downward onto workers who already carried too much. Months ago, she would have hesitated, wondered if it was her place, worried about consequences. This time, she crossed it out. She explained why, calmly, clearly. She offered an alternative that protected margins without sacrificing people. The room listened. The change was approved, no argument, no backlash. As the meeting ended, someone thanked her for catching it. Another asked her opinion on something else. Respect had arrived not as a gift, but as a result. That night she thought back to the rain-soaked entrance of the restaurant, to the moment she almost stayed silent, to how easily her life could have continued shrinking. One sentence had shifted the direction, yes, but staying in that direction had been a choice made every day since. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. She understood now that dignity wasn't something granted by wealth or status. It was something you carried, something you defended in yourself and in others. And when you did, it had a way of multiplying. The story spread in fragments, not headlines, not viral clips, quiet conversations between people who noticed patterns, a waitress who became an operator, a restaurant that stopped bleeding talent, a billionaire who didn't posture, didn't rescue, didn't center himself in the narrative. The truth moved the way it always does when it's real, slow at first, then unstoppable. She was invited to speak once, reluctantly, at a small industry gathering. She stood behind a plain podium, hands steady, and told the story without names, without drama. She talked about how systems reward cruelty when no one interrupts them, how silence feels safe until it costs you everything, how dignity, once defended, changes the math of power. People came up to her afterward. Some thanked her, some argued, some confessed things they had never said out loud. She listened, she asked questions, she took notes. This wasn't about validation, it was about replication. On a flight home, she stared out the window and thought about the girl she used to be, the one who calculated every word, the one who stayed quiet because the risk felt too high. She wished she could tell her something simple. That fear doesn't disappear when you act, it just changes shape. And courage is rarely loud. It's often a sentence spoken when your voice wants to hide. The billionaire called that night brief, efficient. He told her a new initiative had launched using principles she helped define. He said it was working. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Mutual respect doesn't require ceremony. As the call ended, she realized something else. The night at the restaurant wasn't the moment her life changed. It was the moment it stopped being negotiable. She stood alone after the event, the city humming below, and understood that stories like hers rarely end cleanly. They widen, they ripple outward into lives you never meet. Somewhere a waitress would choose to speak instead of shrinking. Somewhere a manager would think twice before mistaking power for cruelty. Somewhere someone watching this would recognize themselves in the silence before a decision. What changed her wasn't wealth or language or even timing. It was the moment she decided that dignity was not negotiable, even when the cost was unclear. That choice didn't make her fearless. It made her honest. And honesty, she learned, is harder to punish than silence. The billionaire never claimed credit. He didn't need to. Influence that matters doesn't announce itself. It leaves structures standing where fear used to live. It leaves people braver than they were yesterday. So if you're watching this and wondering what you would have done, that question matters more than you think. Would you have stayed quiet to stay safe or spoken up to stay whole? There is no perfect answer, only the one you can live with. If this story meant something to you, like this video so more people hear it. Comment below and tell me what you would have done in her place honestly. And subscribe not just for stories of power and justice, but for reminders that courage often begins with a single sentence. Carry that thought with you today. Notice how you treat people who cannot benefit you. Notice when silence feels easier than truth. That is the moment this story asks you to remember her voice and decide who you want to be from now on always.